Welcome to the learning management system of Sri Nilakantha Government Sanskrit College, Pattambi, Palakkad, Kerala. And this is one among the 5 special grade colleges functioning under the Department of Collegiate Education, Government of Kerala. And myself, Sivasankar S. I'm an assistant professor of English and I'm working in this college. And today we are looking into the fundamentals of literature and the fundamentals in our understanding of literature. And this is going to be the first lecture provided by the Department of English as part of the new system, that is learning management system, that has been adopted to the institution for the enhancement of academics. And for convenience, the title of this presentation is going to be The Study of Literature, Part 1. In the attempts made in defining literature, its representation and its interpretation, a sense of incompleteness do prevail. And this incompleteness, this sense of incompleteness, can be taken as a kind of a delimitation when we look into literature. But as we proceed further, we realize that this delimitation itself, or this confusion that is inborn in defining literature itself, is the driving force of literature that has been helping literature to develop through the ages. So here we need to look at the structure of this delimitation. Why is this sense of incompleteness is always there? So when you look at the structure of this delimitation, we can see a beautiful architecture inside this, because the definition of literature, it varies from individual to individual. It's highly subjective in nature, and that's how the sense of incompleteness comes. But the word delimitation or the word incompleteness, usually these two words are taken as negative words that can pull you down. But when it comes to literature, this is the driving force of literature, and it should be taken as a highly constructive word, and a word that has got serious socio-political dimensions. And when you look at the structure of this incompleteness, we realize that the structure is socially significant to the core. So it varies from individual to individual, and by escaping from all kinds of uniform or popular definitions, literature is coming out into the society, or literature identifies with the society. So this is really fundamental in our understanding of literature. That is, there is a structure for the delimitation we can see in the process of defining literature. That is changing. It's ever evolving. It's always moving, and you can't settle it. Every time you have a new definition for literature. So this is how the structure, this is how literature operates when it comes to the definition part of literature. So this variety, this diversity in the definitions of literature is so magnificent. It's so magnificent that thinkers of different time, they form themselves into different groups, and they enrich the process of defining literature. And here we have a wonderful definition given by William Henry Hudson, who lived between the years 1841 to 1922, and he was a naturalist, very much interested in science and nature, and he also tried his hands on literature. And what we have is a wonderful book which is considered as a fundamental to the studies in literature. So in Hudson's opinion, a literature is composed of those books and of those books only which in the first place, by the reason of their subject matter and their mode of treating it, are of general human interest, and in which in the second place the element of form and the pleasure which form gives are to be regarded as essential. So this is a complex definition, though it looks simple, because literature is a composition. This is what Hudson is telling us. And the next opinion he makes is that literature means books, and these books should contain the subject matter, and the subject matter should be of general human interest. It should tell more and more about human beings and how we live and what kind of struggles we are in. And in the second place, the element of form and the pleasure which form gives are to be considered as essential. So though it comes as a second thing, it is very much essential. Don't forget that word, the word essential. So literature should evoke, it should provide you pleasure. So this is one famous definition given to literature, and Hudson is also adding to the practice a new layer to the practice of defining literature. And he introduces, or he defines literature in his famous book, An Introduction to the Study of Literature. So if you have a book that is telling you more and more about human life, why should we read it? Why should we read literature, or why should we go for literature? This is another fundamental question that can come, or this is a fundamental question we have to encounter when you are into literature. See, in this world around, we have plenty of options. You can get distracted easily. This is 2018, and you know what kind of devices are there that can distract you in many ways. And on the other side, you have struggles. Human beings have. A major part of the society is still on a struggle. So these struggles compose the reality around us, and these struggles can also be considered as the life itself. And see, this is a busy world, and in such a world, why read literature, or why should we go for literature? This is the next question that can come. And to this question too, we have diverse answers. So once again, we can go back to Hudson's version there. Hudson says, we care for literature primarily on account of its deep and lasting human significance. A great book grows directly out of life. In reading it, we are brought into a fresh relation with life. It is a vital record of what humans have seen and experienced. And to conclude, it is thus fundamentally an expression of life through the medium of language. So what is happening in literature is, literature is fundamentally an expression of life through the medium of language. So there we can see these two things, literature and life. Literature transfigures life, or life transfigures literature. Both things are possible. And literature is an expression of life itself. And literature encompasses the performance of human drama, how we struggle, how we fight, how we love, how we cry, all those things matter. So this is the performance of human drama that we feel, that we see through literature. And finally, most importantly, literature is an aesthetic appreciation of life. So this is where the pleasure part of literature comes, that we will discuss further. So these two questions are addressed. These two fundamental questions are addressed. What is literature, and why should we go for literature? And the next question we can have is, what drives us to literature? What is forcing you to read literature? And at the same time, what forces are there that is forcing a writer to write a piece of work, a piece of literature, a piece of poetry, a painting, or an art form, or whatever it is? Or what are the driving forces behind this? What is forcing you to create new things? And when you look at this question, just like the structure we have mentioned earlier, to this question also we have diverse opinions, and to this question too we can make a structural analysis. Because when you look at the forces that the forces that can prompt you to literature, we realize that we have to go through the history of literature itself. So when you go through the history of literature, we see how civilizations were redefining itself or redefining themselves. And the history or the redefinition of civilization, in this process, the expressions we have been using also have changed. You must be remembering the archaeological evidences we get from caves. Some expressions would be there. Some symbols would be there. And it is nothing but language, our primordial desire for self-expression. This is very, very much fundamental, and this is very much primordial. I'm deliberately using the word primordial there because our desire for self-expression is so powerful that it is always driven as to literature, both to the reading part and also to the creation part. So we are not interested in ourselves. Our passion for others is also equally important. We shall go back to the basics of sociology, and we say like human beings are social animals, and our interest in people and their doings is the next force that is prompting you to be a part of literature. So in literature, we are inclusive of our own self and others too. And the next layer we see, the next part of the structure is a threefold division. Because we have a world of reality on one side, then the world of imagination is on the other side, and on the other side you are there, the individual. So we are in a sense caught up in this triangle, and this is a magical triangle, and it is always moving, it's ever evolving. So in this triangle, three possibilities are there. The first thing is life, that is the reality around it, it can directly be transfigured into literature or through the medium of language. And the second option is a world of imagination can be created that can redefine the world of reality. And third, a new language, a new form of expression can be synthesized so that we can bring in a better dynamics between the two worlds, the world of reality and the world of imagination. And that's why I say this is a magical triangle, and this is always moving. It's always redefining your own existence. And the next force that is prompting you to literature is the forms we use in literature. What kind of structures do we use as part of literature? And when you address this question, this too is really fundamental. When you look at the forms of literature, we have the history of civilization there. We have already said literature means life. So history of literature means, or an expedition through the forms used in literature means, it's the history of civilization itself. And it can also be the evolution of poetry. In Malayalam and in Sanskrit we call it kavyam. So the evolution of kavyam can be seen there. Evolution of poetry can be seen there. And another thing we can get from this study is that we get to know the evolution of aesthetics, or how beauty has changed, how the reception of beauty has changed, how the definition of beauty has changed, how the appreciation of beauty has changed. So this is fundamental, and this is nothing but our love of form as form. We are really passionate about structures and forms. So these are some of the basic driving forces that are prompting you to be a part of literature, either as a creator or as an appreciator. And then we can look at the subject matter of literature. And this diversity that we have started our discussion by bringing in that word diversity. So the subject matter of literature is also diverse. Or you can also say the subject matter of literature is life itself. So life in literature surpasses itself. So life is transfigured into something, and your life is something beyond. If you look at a poem, a famous poem, any poem for that matter, it grows beyond a simple statement. It can always induce you. It can always prompt you to be different, to think in a different way. So this diversity is there in the subject matter of literature. So what happens when the subject, that is life itself, is placed in literature? So when life comes to literature, the personal experience of the individual as individual may come out in the form of literature, which means our experience of this world, our experience as human beings. Then the relationship of the individual with the social world. Then the external world of nature and our relation to the external world of nature, that too can be a subject matter of literature. And finally, we can also see our efforts to create and express under various forms of literature and art. And now, when life comes into literature, it takes various forms. So literature of personal experience is possible. A literature of common life is possible. A literature that is talking more about the social world is possible. Literature of nature is possible. And literature on literature and art is also possible. So these are some of the basic forms, roughly some of the basic forms of literature. And the forms of literature can also give you a rough idea about the literary genres. So literature of self-expression is one genre of literature. And there we can see a lyric poetry, poetry of meditation and argument, then the elegy, personal essays come there, artistic and literary criticism also come under literature of self-expression, where the subject, where the individual is expressing himself or herself. Then we have literature of external life, and there we can see things like history, biography, the ballad, the epic, the romance, the novel and the drama. And in all these genres, the external world is also there, which is interpreted in a different way. And there is a third category which is not that much popular, but nowadays it's getting a kind of a popularity. It's called literature of description. Books of travel and descriptive essays and poems come under literature of descriptions. So the study on the forms of literature will tell you more about literary genres, and I remind you this is only a rough classification of literary genres. And now let us go back to the definition by William Henry Hudson. He said literature is a composition. Literature is a book, and literature is a composition. It's something which is composed, just like a piece of music. And in this composition, two basic materials are there. One is life itself, which functions as the raw material, and the second one is the creator's or the author's contribution to life. And when these two things come together, or when life comes in, the creator or the author transfigures this life, this raw material, into something highly creative, and what we have is literature. And the creator's contribution can come from four major dimensions. The first dimension is the intellectual dimension. The second one is the emotional contribution the creator can give. Then we have the imagination and fancy part of the creator. And finally, the stylistics in its composition. Let us see these things in detail. So when we see when you look at the intellectual side of the creator, or intellectual contributions of the creator, we see in a piece of poem, in a work of art, thoughts on the subject, that is life, how it is expressed in the work is something which really matters. And this is highly subjective too, and that's why we call it the intellectual part of it. How the creator is viewing the subject, how the creator is taking up this idea of life, or what is his or her version of life. If you are already familiar with literature, and if you are already if you're already into literature, you will definitely have a different take on literature. You ask your friend, he or she will tell you another definition. And if you go to a teacher and ask what literature is, your teacher will be telling you an entirely different story. And there, the intellectual part is also coming. Because how you take the subject, is something, it is something which really matters when you look at the fundamentals of literature and its understanding. And then comes the emotional side, the emotional contributions of the creator. So emotional side means that faculty which keeps on exciting the creator to envision life in a new way. So what is, the emotional side is, it could be the sadness a poet had that has prompted him or her to write a piece of poem. And I think you are already familiar with Aristotle's famous theory on pity and fear when he defines tragedy. And there Aristotle considers this as really fundamental to the purgation process. So the emotional part is also fundamental, just like the intellectual part. And the emotional faculty keeps on exciting the creator, the author, to envision the subject matter in a new way. And then comes the second layer of this emotional part. The creator can look at life in an emotional way, and what happens when it reaches the appreciator, the reader. That too is an emotional contribution from your part, from the reader's part, from the appreciator's part. So similar versions of emotions that are realized by the appreciator or by the reader is also something which is fundamental in our understanding of literature. And then comes imagination and fancy. So imagination and fancy, these are faculty of strong and intense vision. If you are imaginative, it means you have a vision. So this strong and intense vision is exciting the creator and can prompt us to imagine and fantasize. You must be remembering how romantic criticism has talked more and more about imagination and fancy, especially when it comes to Samuel Taylor Coleridge and his poetry and his theory of poetry. So a creator can contribute to the raw material of life, that is the subject matter itself, the subject matter of literature itself. It can come from three major dimensions. One is the intellectual dimension, then we have the emotional dimension or the emotional contribution, then the creator can support life or the subject matter by providing the imaginative faculty that is so strong in exciting us. And then comes the fourth part, the stylistics. Stylistics means how the subject matter of life, how life is molded and fashioned in accordance with the principles of order, symmetry, beauty, and effectiveness. Look at those words: order, symmetry, beauty, and effectiveness. These are the major concern of stylistics. Or rather, we can say stylistics is talking more about the aesthetic part of a work of art. And however strong the other three faculties are, you may be intellectually good, emotionally capable, and your imaginative faculty would be so powerful. But no matter however strong the other three faculties are, the effect literature generates is decided by the stylistic tools adopted by the creator. So these are really fundamental. These are really fundamental in our understanding of literature. So when you go to literature, when you encounter literature, don't forget that literature is nothing but life. Thank you.